Well, here we are. We're in the middle of this story that's found in the book of Ruth. And so if you have a Bible, let's go ahead and get there. Ruth chapter 2. If you don't have a Bible, there should be one underneath the seat in front of you. And we're on page 222 in that Bible. But this is a story that is, it's quite a unique story in a lot of ways. And in some ways, it's like a lot of ordinary things like coming together to make this kind of unique story. But we began the story in chapter 1, and it begins with some, if you were here, it begins with some bad news. But hey, hold on, it just gets worse, actually. It doesn't get any better. It starts off with, hey, there's a famine, and then it just goes downhill from there. There was a famine that took place at the time of this story. What was happening? There was a famine in Israel, and particularly in this little town called Bethlehem, where this family was located. And there was a guy by the name of Elimelech. He's going, look, and the town, or the word Bethlehem literally means house of bread. And so, but there's no bread in the house of bread. And so Elimelech, this man from Bethlehem, is going, look, I got to do what I got to do. I'm going to take my family and we're going to go find bread. And so he took his family and they left Bethlehem and they left Israel away from the presence of God, away from the provision of God, away from the people of God, because God said, this is where I'm working. This is what I'm doing right here in Israel. And Elimelech saying, I just got to figure out how to get food to my family. So he moves them away from Israel and goes to this country called Moab. Moab, they worship this false god called Chemosh. With all kinds of there's a lot that went into their worship of this guy, a lot of sexual immorality, a lot of child sacrifice, a lot of just horrible things. And they would often try to taunt Israel into worshiping this God. And so God would say to Israel, he said to them, he said, look, if there's any place I don't want you to go, if there's any place I don't want you to hang out, it's Moab. Like, stay away from Moab. But Elimelech's going, I got to do what I got to do to take care of my family. Let's go. So he takes his wife, Naomi, and their 2 sons, and they head to Moab. They get settled in Moab. They're boys. They marry these pagan Moabite women who worship this god, Chemosh. And then Elimelech dies. And then the 2 sons die. And so now Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law are left there with no provision, no protection. Elimelech did not set them up for this, did not set them up to be provided for once he was gone. And so what are they going to do? Well, Naomi says, well, it's time. I'm just going to go back home. It's been 10 years. And she says, I'm going to go back to Bethlehem. I don't know these. I don't know this place. This is not my home. These gods that they worship are not my gods. And so I'm going back home to my God and my people. And Ruth says, one of the daughters-in-law, she says, hey, I'm coming with you, because whether you'd recognize it or not, or knew it or not, your God has become my God. And so I'm coming with you to Moab, and your people or to Israel, and your people will be my people. And so Ruth and Naomi, they make their way into Bethlehem. They're homeless, they're poor, and everybody's talking, everybody's going, where's Naomi's husband? Where's her 2 boys? What's going on? And who in the world is that woman? And everybody, the town is all stirred up, wondering what is going on with Naomi. And that's where we pick it up in verse 2. And it says, and last week we saw the evidence of Ruth's faith. It wasn't just like, hey, yeah, your God's going to be my God. It is, no, this is legit. We saw, like we saw last week, this was a legitimate faith that Ruth stepped into, leaving the old God, her old false gods, and worshiping the one true God of Israel. And it says, and Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him whose sight I shall find favor. She's going, look, things are not okay in my life. I'm broken. I'm undone. This is not what I thought my life would be. But God has not abandoned me. And I don't know what he's doing, but I know he's doing something. And this is why, knowing God is with me, knowing God isn't abandoned me, this is why my life, even though everything is wrong right now, my life is not falling apart. God has favor for us, Naomi, and I'm going to go find what that is. In other words, Ruth isn't just waiting for something to happen. She's not just waiting for provision. She's not just sitting there praying for God to bring, bread out of heaven or provide for them in some miraculous way. No, she's going, God's going to provide, and I'm going to go see how he's going to do it. Verse 3, he says, and Naomi had said, go, my daughter. And so she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And so who is this Boaz guy? It's somebody that we were introduced to in verse 1 in chapter 2. And here's what we know. All we know is he's a man of standing, or he's a worthy man, and he is from the clan of Elimelech. He comes from the family of Elimelech. Now, that's the second time in 3 verses that the writer says this guy Boaz comes from the clan of Elimelech. So why is that? Why does he see the need of pointing that out? Well, if you had read this story at that time in that culture, you would have immediately picked up on this. In that culture, when a husband died young, what would happen is it was just part of the culture that the next in line, like beginning with the brother, if he had a brother, the brother would marry the widow, his widow. Or if he didn't have a brother, the next in line in the family would marry her. That way, that she would have some protection, she would have some provision, and so that the family line would go on. It would continue. She could bear children, and they could carry the family line on. Well, at this point, all we know is that Naomi says, "I don't have anybody." Like when she's trying to tell Ruth to stay back in Moab and go get your own family and go get a new husband, she's going, look, I don't have one of those. I don't have anybody in my family that can marry you and take care of you and carry on the family line. That's not happening in Bethlehem. That's not happening in Israel. So there's no reason for you to come with me. And that's when she's going, but my God, your God is my God. And so regardless, I've got to come with you. And so that's all we know. There is nobody. There is nobody for Ruth to marry. Ruth is just going to be a widow all of her life, and that's what she's planning on. The family line is done. It's done. It ends with Ruth. That's it. There's no one going to carry on Elimelech, his family line. It's over. But Boaz is that guy. Like he's that guy that could marry Ruth, that could carry on, that could provide, protect. But nobody knows that yet. Like nobody knows that. But the writer's going, as I said last week, keep an eye on this guy. Verse 4, and behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered, well, the Lord bless you. So right away we get something, we see something about this guy Boaz. He's a business owner. He's a man who has wealth. He's done well for himself. He's a man of influence. And in the culture where everybody says, well, your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, and you just do whatever makes you happy and I'll do whatever makes me happy, or literally what it says in the scripture in that culture in that day, it was everybody just did what was right in their own eyes. In a culture where everybody just did what was right in their own eyes, what they felt in the moment, whatever pleasure, whatever thing they wanted to pursue in the moment, you got a guy like Boaz. You have Boaz who stands out amongst all the rest, and he shows up to his employees, and he's not a secret worshiper of God. He's not a guy who says, well, yeah, I go to church on the weekends and I have private devotions even, but when I'm at work, man, I'm at work. I just got to, I got to separate that. I don't want to be pushing all that around, and that's not Boaz. Boaz is going, no, I'm a follower of God. Like I worship God. I fear God. I trust God. I can't remove that from who I am. Understand, if you're a Christian, there is no such thing as a separation of spiritual and secular in your life. That just doesn't make any sense. If you're a Christian, before anything else and in everything else, You are a follower of Jesus Christ. You have been sent. The reason that you are here, the reason that God woke you up this morning and put breath in your lungs is to make Jesus known. That wherever you go, wherever you work, wherever you live, that you would make Jesus known in that place to those people. And so I just ask you, do you see what you're doing at school, at work, in the neighborhood? Do you see what you're doing as a spiritual matter? Like, I can understand that if you're a business owner, if you're a manager of your company, if you have position or of authority or influence where you are, if you are a Christian, know that more than just a business leader in that place, you are a spiritual leader in that place. Long before some of those people will ever come to know what it means to be part of God's church, you are a pastor to those people in that place. And so let me just ask you again, do you see what you do? Do you see your place in that classroom, in those halls, in that workspace, on that job site, in that neighborhood? Do you see this, that what you're doing is a spiritual matter? For Boaz, faith wasn't a once a week or morning routine kind of thing. It was just who he was. Like I can't pull that out. I fear God, I trust God, I worship God, I love God. I can't just ignore that in certain spaces. It's who I am, it's how I operate. It informs everything about my life. Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" So Boaz shows up at his own field and he notices Ruth. He doesn't know who she is, but he notices her. And so he goes to the guy that he's left in charge of the field and he's asked about, who is this woman? And so the guy responds, says, the servant who was in charge of the reapers answers, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers.' So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest." So by this time, Ruth has been working all day long. In other words, she's not going, man, if God were actually like really taking care of me, this would be a lot easier. That's not crossing her mind. No, she's making the best of her situation. She's working hard and trusting God along the way. And here is the moment. Like, this is the moment right here. Like, this is it. This is the moment. This is the first encounter between Ruth and Boaz. This is it. Neither one of them have any idea of the significance of this moment right here. She's sweaty. She's been working all day. She's a mess. She's working hard to just get some food for her and her mother-in-law, just hoping that whoever shows up that owns this field won't kick her out, but will let her continue to get scraps from the field. And she said, there's favor out there somewhere. There's favor out there somewhere, and I'm going to find it. So here's what happens. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" Listen, Ruth went out. She left Naomi that morning just going, hey, there's favor. There's favor out there. Literally, the word for favor is the word grace. There's grace out there somewhere, and I'm going to go find it. And Boaz is just the kind of person that Ruth was looking for. Someone to allow her to safely pick up the scraps from the field. But she never expected this. She never expected to be treated like this, to be spoken to like this. She's a Moabite, and everyone knows it. And he's treating her like he doesn't know that she's a Moabite. But of course he does. And here we find out what's behind all of this. But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land, and you came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. And then she said, I have found favor